A dying alien fell into his arms. Now her fate rests in his hands. The northern lights painted ribbons of green and purple across the Montana sky as Marcus Reed adjusted his camera settings. The forecast had predicted a meteor shower tonight, and he wasn't going to miss capturing it. As a wildlife photographer, he was used to patience, waiting for the perfect moment when light and subject aligned in harmony. But tonight felt different. The air hummed with an electric anticipation he couldn't explain. The first meteors streaked across the sky in brilliant arcs of white and blue. Marcus clicked away, his shutter capturing each celestial dancer. But one particular streak caught his attention. It moved wrong, too slow, too deliberate, and it was getting bigger. The object crashed into the forest less than a mile from his position, the impact sending a tremor through the earth that nearly knocked him off his feet. Marcus hesitated only for a moment before grabbing his emergency kit and heading toward the impact site. If someone was hurt, they would need help. They were hours from the nearest hospital. The crash site glowed with an ethereal blue light. What he found wasn't a meteor, but something that looked like a small craft, its silver surface etched with swirling patterns that seemed to move in the moonlight. And there, lying in the frost-covered grass beside it, was a woman. No, not a woman, something else. Her skin shimmered like mother of pearl, catching the starlight and reflecting it in impossible ways. Delicate markings traced down her arms and across her face like luminescent tattoos. She was breathing, but each breath seemed to pain her, and a dark liquid that gleamed like liquid mercury seeped from a wound in her side. "Hey," Marcus called softly, approaching slowly. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that swirled with colors he had no names for. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound before losing consciousness again. Marcus knew he should call someone, the police, the military, someone who would know what to do with an alien crash landing. But something stopped him. The way she had looked at him, there had been fear in those otherworldly eyes. Fear and desperation. He made his decision quickly, wrapping her in his spare thermal blanket and carefully lifting her. She weighed almost nothing, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. The craft behind them pulsed once, then seemed to dissolve into the air, leaving no trace of its existence. Marcus carried her back to his cabin, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? What was she running from? Because something in his gut told him she was running. You didn't crash land in the middle of nowhere looking that scared unless something was chasing you. Inside his cabin, he laid her gently on his bed and began treating her wound as best he could. The injury seemed to be healing itself slowly, the edges knitting together with tiny sparks of light. He cleaned away the silver blood and wrapped the wound with clean bandages. Hopping alien biology wasn't too different from human when it came to basic first aid. As he worked, she stirred again, her eyes opening to fix on him with that mesmerizing gaze. This time, when she spoke, he could understand her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Venna." "Marcus," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the surreal situation. "You're safe here." She smiled weakly, reaching out to touch his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished stone. "No one is safe," she murmured before drifting back into unconsciousness. Marcus sat back in his chair, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Outside, the meteor shower continued, stars falling like rain across the sky. But now he wondered how many of those lights were really meteors, and how many were something else entirely, something wonderful and terrible and beyond his understanding. He had always come to these mountains to photograph wildlife, to capture the untamed beauty of Earth's creatures. Now he found himself guardian to something far stranger and more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. And somehow, he knew his life would never be the same. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Marcus hadn't slept, spending the night watching over his otherworldly guest. Venna had been restless in her healing sleep, sometimes murmuring words in a language that made the air shimmer, other times reaching out as if trying to grasp something just beyond her reach. As the first rays of sunlight touched her face, her eyes opened. The swirling colors in her irises seemed calmer now, like a storm that had passed. She sat up slowly, touching the bandaged wound at her side with careful fingers. "You helped me," she said, not a question but a statement filled with wonder. "Most humans would have called their authorities." Marcus handed her a cup of tea, which she accepted with curious delight. "I'm not most humans. I prefer the company of mountains and wildlife to people." He hesitated, then added, "And something told me you didn't want to be found." Venna's expression darkened like a cloud passing over the moon. "No, I didn't." She took a sip of tea, her eyes widening at the taste. "This is wonderful. We have nothing like this where I come from." "And where is that exactly?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite his burning curiosity. She moved to the cabin's window, gazing at the mountain landscape. "Far, beyond your maps and measurements, my people were, travelers of the spaces between stars." Her voice caught on the word were, heavy with grief. "What happened to them?" Marcus found himself moving closer, drawn by the sorrow in her voice. Venna's markings dimmed like stars fading at dawn. "We were peaceful explorers seeking beauty in the universe, but there are others who seek only power. They came without warning, shadows that devour light." She turned to face him, and Marcus saw centuries of pain in her eyes. "I am the last of my kind, the only one who escaped." Marcus wanted to reach out to offer comfort, but something in her otherworldly grace held him back. Instead, he asked, "The shadows, they're still hunting you?" She nodded, her silver hair catching the morning light. "Always, they want what my people could do, our ability to traverse space without ships, to bend reality itself. But it's not something that can be taken. It's part of what we are." She looked down at her hands, where tiny points of light danced between her fingers like fireflies. "What I am." "You're safe here," Marcus said, surprising himself with the fierceness in his voice. "My cabin's remote. No one comes up here except me." Venna smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Your kindness is unexpected. Humans have a reputation among the stars as being primitive, violent, but you—" She reached out, her cool fingers brushing his cheek. "You're different." Marcus felt his heart skip at her touch. The morning light caught in her silvery skin, making her glow like starlight given form. He had photographed the most beautiful moments in nature: sunrise over pristine snow, the aurora dancing in winter skis, light breaking through storm clouds, but nothing compared to her. "Tell me about your world," he said softly. "What was it like?" And so she did. As the morning deepened, Venna told him of crystal cities that sang in stellar winds, of gardens that floated in space, blooming with flowers that fed on starlight. She spoke of her people's art, paintings made of living light, music that could shape reality itself. With each word, each gesture, Marcus felt himself falling deeper into her otherworldly grace. But even as they talked, he noticed how she would sometimes tense, her head tilting as if listening for something beyond human hearing. Her fear was never far away, a shadow lurking at the edges of this peaceful moment. "I should leave," she said finally, though he could hear the reluctance in her voice. "Every moment I stay puts you in danger." 3 days of snowfall had transformed the mountain into a winter wonderland, and 3 days of conversations had transformed something in Marcus's heart. He found himself mesmerized by everything about Venna, the way she delighted in simple things like the taste of coffee or the sound of wind in the pines, how she would trace patterns in the frost on the windows that seemed to move and dance in the light. But on the fourth morning, everything changed. Marcus woke to find Venna standing rigid by the window, her markings pulsing with an urgent light. The air around her crackled with energy that made his hair stand on end. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "I can feel them tearing through space." Marcus jumped up, his heart pounding. "How long?" "Minutes, maybe less." She turned to him, her eyes swirling with desperate colors. "Marcus, you need to run. Get as far from here as you can. They'll destroy everything in their path to reach me." Instead of running, he grabbed his emergency pack and took her hand. "I'm not leaving you. My truck's outside. We can try to outrun them." "You don't understand what they are," Venna protested, even as she let him pull her toward the door. "They're not like anything you've faced before." The sky above them suddenly darkened, as if something had swallowed the morning sun. A low vibration hummed through the air, making Marcus's teeth ache. Then he saw them, shapes forming in the sky like tears in reality itself, revealing something that hurt his eyes to look at. The shadows Venna had spoken of weren't just darkness. They were the absence of everything, holes in the universe that moved with terrible purpose. They ran for the truck, their feet crunching in the snow. Marcus's hands shook as he fumbled with the keys. Just as he got the engine started, something struck the ground nearby with enough force to make the truck rock on its wheels. Where the thing had hit, the snow wasn't just melting, it was ceasing to exist, leaving a perfect circle of nothingness. "Drive," Venna cried, her voice carrying a harmonics that made the truck's windows vibrate. Marcus slammed the accelerator, and they shot forward down the mountain road. In the rearview mirror, he could see the shadows flowing after them like liquid darkness. "What do they want?" Marcus asked, wrestling with the steering wheel as they took a sharp turn. "Why not just take what they want by force?" "Because they can't," Venna explained, her markings glowing brighter with each passing moment. "What they want is part of my essence, my soul. They can only take it if I give it willingly, or—" she swallowed hard. "Or if I die, then it becomes part of the universe again, something they can harvest." Another shadow bolt struck the road ahead of them, forcing Marcus to swerve violently. The truck skidded on the icy road, nearly going over the edge of the cliff. Venna reached out, and suddenly the air around the truck solidified, pushing them back onto the road. "I can't keep doing that," she gasped, clearly drained by the effort. "My powers are still weak from the crash." Marcus's mind raced as he drove, trying to think of a way out. The shadows were gaining on them, and the road ahead offered no shelter. Then he remembered something, an old mining tunnel, abandoned decades ago. It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. "Hold on," he said, making a sharp turn onto a barely visible side road. The shadows followed, their presence making the very air grow thin and cold. The entrance to the tunnel loomed ahead, a dark mouth in the mountainside. "Marcus, no," Venna said, realizing his plan. "We'll be trapped." "Trust me," he replied, not slowing down as they approached the tunnel. Behind them, the shadows surged forward, sensing their prey was cornered. At the last possible moment, Marcus slammed on the brakes and cut the wheel hard. The truck spun, sending up a spray of snow and gravel. The shadows rushed into the tunnel after them, just as Marcus had hoped. He grabbed a flare from his emergency kit, lit it, and threw it at the tunnel's ceiling where he knew the weakest point was. The red light illuminated ancient support beams for a brief second before the explosion hit. The tunnel's entrance collapsed in a thundering cascade of rock and snow, trapping the shadow beings inside. But they weren't finished. Even as the dust settled, dark tendrils began seeping through the smallest cracks in the rubble. "That won't hold them for long," Venna said, her voice weak but urgent. "Nothing in your world can truly contain them." Marcus took her hand, feeling the cool silk of her skin against his. "Then we keep running together." She looked at him with those infinite eyes, and he saw something new in them, not just fear or gratitude, but something deeper, something that made his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with their narrow escape. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why risk everything for me?" Before he could answer, the rubble behind them began to shake. The shadows were breaking free. But in that moment, looking into Venna's eyes, Marcus knew exactly why he was risking everything. He just hoped they would live long enough for him to tell her. They drove through the night, taking back roads and forest trails, while Venna used what remained of her strength to mask their trail from the shadow hunters. The truck's heater fought against the winter chill, but Marcus could still see her trembling. "There's a place," he said, breaking the tense silence. "An old observatory in the mountains. It's been abandoned for years, but the equipment might still work. If you could send a signal to anyone who might help." Venna's markings pulsed weakly. "There's no one left to signal. My people are gone, scattered across the stars, or—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we'll figure something else out." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "I'm not letting them take you." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight that filtered through the trees. "You've already done more than anyone ever has, but these creatures, they won't stop. They'll keep coming until—" "Until what?" Marcus asked when she fell silent. "Until I give them what they want, or until I die." She squeezed his hand. There is another way, but it would mean never going home again. Before she could explain further, a dark shape materialized in the road ahead. Marcus swerved, but the truck's tires hit a patch of ice. They spun out of control, sliding toward the edge of a steep ravine. Time seemed to slow as Venna threw up her hands, her markings blazing with desperate light. The air around them solidified, cushioning their impact as the truck rolled several times before coming to rest at the bottom of the ravine. Marcus came to with the taste of blood in his mouth. Venna was already pulling him from the wreckage, her touch sending waves of soothing energy through his battered body. But the effort cost her. He could see her markings growing dimmer. "You have to run," she said, helping him stand. "They're close now, and I won't let you die for me." "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus said firmly, despite the pain that shot through his ribs. "Whatever this other way is, tell me. There has to be a solution that doesn't end with you sacrificing yourself." Above them, the shadows began to descend like a curtain of darkness falling over the world. Venna looked at them, then back at Marcus, tears like liquid starlight running down her cheeks. "The only way to stop them is to bind my essence to something else, something they can't take. But the process would change me forever. I would lose most of my powers, become almost human." She touched his face gently. "I would never see the stars as I once did, never drift through the spaces between worlds again." "But you would live," Marcus said softly. "You would be free." The shadows were almost upon them now, their presence making reality itself waver and distort. Venna's markings began to pulse with a new rhythm, like a heart learning to beat differently. "Yes," she whispered, "but I would need an anchor, someone to bind myself to, someone whose soul could help hold mine in this form." Her eyes met his, full of question and hope and fear. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Do it," he said, pulling her close as the shadows descended around them. "Bind yourself to me." Venna pressed her forehead to his, her markings beginning to glow with an intensity that made the darkness retreat. "It will change you too," she warned. "You'll never be fully human again." "I don't care," Marcus replied. "Some things are worth any price." The air between them began to shimmer as Venna started to sing in that strange language that made reality ripple. Her markings blazed brighter and brighter, patterns of light flowing from her skin onto his. The shadows shrieked, a sound that existed somewhere between sound and silence, and surged forward in one final, desperate attack. But they were too late. The bond was already forming, threads of starlight weaving between two souls, binding them together in ways that transcended physical reality. Marcus felt it like a sunrise in his heart, warm and brilliant and eternal. He could feel Venna's essence merging with his, not consuming or being consumed, but creating something entirely new. The shadows tried to grasp her power, but it was no longer there for them to take. It had transformed into something they couldn't touch, protected within the shared space of two harmonized souls. With a sound like the universe sighing, they dissolved, returning to whatever dark spaces they had emerged from. When it was over, Venna stood changed. Her skin still held a subtle shimmer, but the bright markings had faded to delicate patterns that looked almost like tattoos. Her eyes remained otherworldly, but now they held warmth alongside their infinite depths. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, noticing that his own skin now held a faint luminescence in the starlight. "Different," she said, wonder in her voice. "Grounded, I can still feel the stars, but distantly, like a memory of home rather than home itself." She looked up at him anxiously. "Do you regret it?" Marcus pulled her close and kissed her. Where their lips met, tiny points of light danced like fireflies. "Never," he whispered against her mouth. "Home isn't always a place, sometimes it's a person." 1 year later, Marcus's cabin had been rebuilt, now with large windows that offered perfect views of the night sky. His photography had taken an interesting turn. Somehow, his images now captured things most people couldn't see, hints of the extraordinary that existed just beyond normal perception. They never sold well in mainstream galleries, but they had developed quite a following among those who believed in something more than the ordinary world. Venna stood in their garden, teaching him how to coax plants to grow in patterns that caught starlight and held it like dew. She couldn't reshape reality anymore, but she had found new ways to create beauty. Together, they had built something unique, a life balanced between Earth and stars, ordinary and extraordinary. Sometimes at night, they would lie in the snow and watch the stars, their slightly luminescent skin creating patterns in the darkness. Venna would tell stories of her travels through space, and Marcus would share his own tales of Earth's wild places. Their joined hands would glow softly, a reminder of the choice they had made to find home not in any one world, but in each other. And if sometimes the shadows stirred in the deep places between stars, they never came near. They had learned that some bonds cannot be broken, some powers cannot be stolen, and some loves are strong enough to change the very nature of reality itself.